Hey David, how are you?
I am good. I cannot complain. How are you?
I'm doing well and super stoked to have you. I've known you for many years. We kind of collaborated through a past role that I had and a past role you had too. So it's really cool to be meeting on these terms and just catch up with what you're doing. But got to ask you before we start, what's in your glass this afternoon? Or do you have something you enjoy sipping on throughout the day usually?
So right now, it happens to be tea. I'm a huge coffee drinker, love coffee, love everything about it, and love the coffee culture. However, I am a trader and have been drinking more tea to avoid headaches and all the reasons why people complain about coffee.
Yep.
So we'll see if I stick with it. I think I've been doing it for like 2 months. But shout out Harney and Sons.
Oh yeah.
If you don't like tea, you gotta try that stuff.
Yes, I can definitely agree with that. They have a great shop in I think
Yeah.
Soho area. It's amazing. So
Hmm.
yeah, love that that tea brand for sure. That's amazing. Well, like I said, excited to chat. You've been around the block, right? You're currently at OpenFortune. You've been at Vayner Sports. You launched your own business for a little bit. I'm curious with all of these different I guess, roads that you've been down, what have you learned about yourself or your career along the way?
Uh, okay, that's a big question, but I think that the biggest thing that I've learned that I am somewhat resilient. I didn't have to. I'd sometimes talk down to myself, but now looking back at my career and just my personal life in general, when things have gone awry, I'm still here and I'm doing okay. So that is probably the biggest thing I've learned about myself. And then when it comes to like work and business, AJ Vaynerchuk, who was my old boss, Gary's brother, at VaynerMedia and Vayner Sports, he would always say, under promise and over deliver in everything you do. And I take that into my personal life as well when I'm talking to friends or my girlfriend and say, oh, like, this place won't be that good, right? And then it'll end up being good, or vice versa with work and saying, hey, I got this deadline. I know that this is going to take me a week to do, but I'm going to put it out 2 weeks and tell the client or whoever it is that it'll be done in 2 to 3 weeks. Then come in with it in a week, and they're going to think you're a superhero, and just view you as somebody who says what they're going to do and does it. So yeah, I think those two things to answer your question.
Yeah, I think that's a kind of a tough lesson you have to learn over time, especially for our younger professionals listening. They're very eager, very ready to just please and accomplish whatever that goal or task is pretty quickly. But I think over time you'll find that that reflects a lot better on you versus over promising and then just not delivering on your promise there. So it's always great advice to hear and be reminded of.
Totally. And also, like, the world doesn't revolve around you in
Right.
your entry level roles or your senior level roles. So all your boss is thinking about is, oh, David said he was going to get me back this on Friday. Great.
Yeah.
And then it's out of his or her head.
Yeah,
So yeah, I hope
for
I hope
sure.
that advice can be taken well.
Yeah, always. Well, so as I mentioned, you were in corporate and then you left for a little bit and now you're back in corporate. So we were talking kind of off record. Sometimes those pivots are hard to make. A lot of times, especially if we leave corporate, we say we're never going back, we're never getting a corporate job again. And I think it's important to be open. So I'm curious from your end, just through these shifts, whether it's industry shifts or even just the style of work that you're doing do you have any advice or encouragement to a professional kind of looking at their career and feeling like they have to stay in a similar path the whole time? And do you feel it's beneficial to kind of, I guess, learn from these different types of industries,
Sure.
types of roles throughout your career?
Sure. Well, I never thought that I would run my own company with the sports production angle and work with some of the top athletes, and then transfer from that into running marketing for a fortune cookie company that puts ads in billions of fortune cookies. That never was on my radar or in college. But I think like life has a fun, weird way of working itself out. And also time is I found that I loved running my own company. But I didn't want to fit a round peg into a square hole with the time being. And it's something where I do believe that I'll run my own business at some point, but life is short, but life is long in a lot of ways. Our parents, grandparents, generations, they were in jobs for 30, 40, 50 years, and that was just normal. Now, if you stay at a place for 2 years, um, it it's normal, and it's also like a good amount of time. People are like, "Oh, you've been there 2 years. That's a good amount of time." Versus our parents and grandparents generation, they would never say that.
Hmm.
So I think, and then also on top of that, just learning from different people. This very cliche advice, but when you jump around jobs every 2 or 3 years, I think you take a lot out of it. Just speaking to a lot of people on my podcast, where I interview people on their job careers and journeys called "How the fuck did you get that job?" A lot of people have said you get rewarded for switching every 2 or 3 years,
Hmm.
um, and I found so far that that's been I've been rewarded for that. But love where I currently am, and just excited to see where the road takes me.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, with especially at a younger age and when you're younger in your professional career, you have this eagerness about what's next. What's the next step I can take, whether it's within a company or with a different company. And so I'm curious to your thoughts on just networking within a company where you're at to continue those relationships. And you never know, where those relationships will come in handy down the road. So, what advice do you have for just making the most of those connections within a company while you're there, and how do you foster those relationships within a
Sure.
business?
I, I mean, I think it's a really interesting question, and I forget the exact number, but they say you can only really have like 150 real friends. So I don't necessarily try to spread myself too thin. I'd rather have the depth of a relationship, um, but also have those weak ties. And weak ties just the person, you're very friendly with them. I think in my case, it just happens to be very like I don't want to be salesy. I just want, hey, like if I can help you, great. Because they're gonna decide to work with me or they're not. But just updating people on what they're doing, like being genuinely interested in what others are building, whether that be even just commenting on somebody's thing or shooting them a little text of word of encouragement. I think that goes a very long way. And then just being friends with people. Like I only have 20, 30 close friends, but I invest heavily in those relationships. And one of my best friends from high school got me the job that I'm currently at. I never would think that, and he's been very helpful at the job I'm currently at and has brought in a bunch of deals for us. But I never thought my friend from sixth grade, seventh grade would help me out like that from a business perspective. But it happens to work because he'll be one of the best men at my wedding, right? So hopefully taking care of other people as well as them taking care of you.
For sure. Well, let's talk about your current role at OpenFortune. So, you've been kind of in the middle of this rebrand project and working through that. I'm curious with a rebrand, because that's a huge undertaking. How are you approaching that project, or how have you approached that project in the past? And what kind of research are you doing on the audience, your potential client base, in order to make sure that rebrand is reflective of, the brand voice, the essence, but also speaking
Sure.
directly to the consumer?
Sure. Well, it's funny because when I got brought on, I was brought on as a, you know, VP director of content. And everybody knows that social media is super important. It's a building block and companies should do it, right? It's 2024, people know that. But when I walked in and I was really excited to do that for them, I realized they had no foundational stuff and no foundational work on the brand or didn't know how to talk to their audience or anything. So I was like, how am I supposed to really make good social content without knowing how we talk to our consumers, what do people like about us or dislike about us, right? I just didn't want to throw things at a wall. So I was
Mhm.
like, hey guys, what if we just made me head of marketing here? And I'm going to start with that stuff because that will help you grow this company when I'm here, when I'm not here, right? Just having the foundation. So first thing I did was I spoke to our internally as people who are we, what do we do? People had a very hard time with that, as well as in our website as well. Didn't really. give a good example of what we were. Our clients knew who we were, but our consumers didn't at all. So it was speaking to them and understanding, okay, what do they think we are? Because a
Mhm.
brand is what they think we are. It's not what I say it is. I can
Right.
say OpenFortune is the greatest thing ever, but if somebody's like, like
Yep.
that's what it is. So that's where I started, and then I started learning more and more about like what we were struggling with, and backing up, like OpenFortune. It's an interesting company. They own the production and media rights of over 2 billion fortune cookies with 47,000 restaurants, reaching 99% of zip code. So that's more restaurants than McDonald's, Burger King, KFC, Wendy's combined. But people didn't know that, and people thought we just did 500 fortune cookies for kids' wedding, or not kids, babies' birthdays and weddings and stuff like that. So I first thing was understanding, hey, we're breaking into this new market. Brands like working with us, but I like starting with like who's our enemy, right? And it was kind of meta, but I was like, I think our enemy is kind of ourself. I think the fortune cookie, it's small, it's
Mhm.
tiny, it's kind of, you could say gimmicky, even though I don't want to call it gimmicky, right? But versus our alternatives, which are marketers' alternatives when they're buying out of home, is airport ads, buses, subway ads, these big things that you see, right? Uh, and I think that people are just viewing us as small because of that. So it's understanding, hey, we need to be self-aware that we are this fortune cookie company. It is kind of funny. It is weird. And understanding that that needs to come into our tone of voice. And we need to kind of be able to make fun of ourselves. So from there, I thought, hey, who's a celebrity or who's somebody that we can base ourselves off? And after putting more thought into it and talking to clients and different marketers, like I wanted to find somebody that was both funny and goofy, right? But I didn't want to be just like comics and Disney, right? But also at the same point, taken very seriously in business. And
Mhm.
that idea was Ryan Reynolds, right? It's somebody who um, he can play a very, very serious role. He's very well respected in business and acting, but also he can star in Deadpool. He can crack a joke. He doesn't take himself too seriously. He'll buy a soccer team. He'll do crazy shit. And like I was like, okay, that's somebody that we can kind of relate ourselves to. Can our sales team talk like Ryan Reynolds? Like, he's like the coolest guy ever. I can't talk like him, right? But I can try to understand what he would say. So then I took our team kind of through this, like, what would Ryan say? What would Ryan, and asking yourself that question before you send an email or talk about our value prop. He would probably crack a joke. He wouldn't take himself too seriously. He would be authentic, right? And from there, I was like, here are values, literally Googling Ryan Reynolds values and being like, okay, sure, they're OpenFortune values from now on. But I know I'm rambling, but that was kind of my thought process when working with brand and understanding where we are and who we are and how we convey that.
Yeah, I feel like that's such a good exercise to do, even if you're not going through a rebrand, just having that brand voice locked down and everyone in your team, as you mentioned, is aware of how we speak, how we portray ourselves online and sales calls and sales emails. I think that's such an important exercise to do, even every once in a while, just to ensure alignment there.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to know too, with this whole project and undertaking, you mentioned you kind of came in and said, hey, we need to do this or else I can't really do my job. How did you kind of pitch that or build confidence in order to pitch that? Because I feel like there's a lot of marketers out there that are like, I feel like I know what we need to be doing, but I don't know how I should be preparing to present this idea or pitch this idea. So any tips on that? What kind of like data or insights should you bring to the
Yeah.
table in those kind of conversations?
Sure. So there's two things. Is one is like, here's what's working, or here's
Mhm.
the problem, right? Here's what's happening, and our customers and people who are future customers don't know who we are, right? That's marketing, is understanding, hey, how do we get them to think that we are the cool kids, or they need our products?
Yeah.
And if we don't do anything, everything stays the same, right? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So, hey, team, if we want different results, maybe we've never gone through this brand thing. We should do this. And just understand, and kind of, I just used that quote, like I made a deck for it. And I was just like, a brand, I forget who it is. A brand isn't what you say it is, it's what they say it is.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what other people are saying what we are. This is not what we are. Okay, how do we change that? We have to go through this brand exercise. The tough thing, and I think the hardest thing is like, how do you, because the last thing a founder or anybody wants to do in pitching internally or you're pitching is building, everybody's seen the 150-page brand guide.
Yeah.
That just is like collecting dust under everything and never gets used. That is just a waste of money, right? And my process was, and people will push back on me, I've never done a brand rehaul for like Pepsi. That's a different beast, right? We're talking smaller, more nimble shops. But I wanted to make it 6-7 pages. I wanted to make it really easy and digestible. And even from the jump, like empathizing, the first page on it is like, first off, you might be rolling your eyes at the notion of this brand guide salesperson, right?
Yeah.
Because they are, right? They're like, oh, fucking David sent me this fucking brand guide. I don't want to read this. Like, I just need to close deals or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I think the second thing was having a plan for it before it's even finished, right?
Yeah.
So my plan was like, hey, and I was very open with them that I never had done this, but they believed in me. And I said, what if we create an AI robot that can be an amazing copywriter and understand our tone of voice? Because I know that our salespeople were not writing majors in colleges. They're really good at sales, but they're not necessarily the most creative writing type. But what if we can build something that understands our value prop, understands how we speak, and then when they're talking to JetBlue Airways or JetBlue Airline, they can say, hey, here's the email I want to send. Can you copy and paste it into this robot and make it more tone of voice like? And I think that helped them understand like, hey, this can be really usable and not just collect dust.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through that project simultaneously while building the brand guidelines. And now our salespeople use that AI robot to help them kind of get into more of a what would Ryan Reynolds say response. And it gets them 80-90% there. There's still error. And sometimes it still sounds like a robot and atrophies. But at least the founder and the rest of the C-suite was able to say, hey, David has a plan with it. It's not going to collect dust. It's also not going to be 100 pages. And here's how we are going to use it.
Yeah.
So I think that helped.
Yeah.
Sell it in.
What platform or platforms are you guys using for that kind of process and build out?
I wish that I recorded the whole entire time I was training it, because it was kind of funny. And I was like, oh, I remember typing like, you're my favorite AI.
Yeah.
And it was like, it didn't know how to respond. But I just kind of trained it like I would train like a creative writing or brand marketing manager, like somebody underneath me, and just being like, hey, like, I really liked how so here's what we do. First of all, here's the problem we were looking to solve. We need something that can, and it was ChatGPT, right? And I'm sure there are more efficient ways of doing this, but here's the problem we were looking to solve. I need a robot that is going to spit out our value prop and can take any email that we are going to ever send in our sales or that can write like us. And I need you to put it in tone of voice for us. Okay, asking it, like, what questions do you need for me to answer in order for you to do your job well? Okay, comes up with more. And then give me an example. V1, it was shit. But I was like, hey, this is really good, but like, can you just tweak this? Like, I didn't like how you talked about put our clients in a joking manner. We shouldn't joke about our clients. We shouldn't make fun. We can make fun of ourselves, but like, let's not make fun of Purple Mattress for working with us.
Right.
And it was just kind of through that iterative process. And it was like about like 40 hours that I was like, ooh, okay. Like, now I think it's a better writer than I am. Which is scary to replace yourself. But at the same time, like, I don't want to write everybody's LinkedIn post.
Right.
I don't, right? So I'd much rather the AI. And there's its own struggles with it of like it does atrophy. And then you need to kind of train it up again, but it's definitely been very useful. And I would suggest like for anybody, just like screw around with AI, have some fun, see what it can do. I think you'll be surprised, and just try different use cases because it's being used to solve way bigger problems and issues than brand guides. So I'm sure that I know that it can do a good job helping you build a brand guide, etc.
Yeah, and we don't have to be afraid of it. I think there's a lot of marketers still like, this is going to take over my role. This is not helpful, or this is, data privacy, whatever. But I think there's so many ways it can just enhance what we're doing that I think
Yeah,
be open to it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I use it to help myself write emails, format Notion documents, check for grammar, and those are things that save time. And on top of that, like, yes, I don't want to be scared, but at the same time, like, what was it, like Henry Ford said, like everybody would just want a faster horse. Like this is learning how to drive a car. This is learning how to ride a horse, and the best marketers, I think, are going to be the ones that can use it and know are familiar enough with it to use it, because then they'll be able to scale out their teams and at a way cheaper cost.
Yeah.
Let's see where it goes.
Well, let's pivot a little bit and talk podcasting. So, what benefits have you seen to come from podcasting for building a brand? I'm curious how it's kind of enhanced what you're doing over at OpenFortune, or, what's your experience there overall?
Yeah, I think it's one of the best things I've done, and I was very very skeptical. I remember me and my old roommate, old co-founder, we started it together. And I was like, really? I'm gonna be a podcast host? And then secondly, like, really? Like, I'm gonna be another white dude with a podcast?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be that guy. And now, fast forward 4 years later, I'm that guy. But I do think that the biggest thing it's provided me is the ability to learn from others and open doors that wouldn't have been opened. Um, I remember the first 10 episodes, I literally just asked anybody who wouldn't say no, like my friends who couldn't say no to me, who had cool jobs, and I was like, "Fuck it. All right, cool, let's try this out." And then like episode 11 came by, and like I was like, I'm just gonna shoot my shot and invite the CEO of Bluestone Lane. It was like my favorite coffee shop, and within
Yep.
5-10 minutes, I'd love to come on this. This sounds great, and I was we had 11 episodes and it was just my friends and nobody was listening. I realized, okay, this is a real tool to build relationships and learn from people. And a lot of these people haven't been on podcasts. They're not, and they want to talk about themselves. When you asked me to come on, I was like, great, I'll talk about myself for an hour. Like everybody does. And you're lying if you don't. That's what I kind of realized, like, hey, there's something here. I need to keep doing this. And fast forward 130, 140 episodes later, it helped me secure the job at OpenFortune. They came on and sponsored the podcast, used it as a huge biz dev tool for them. I get to talk to cool people.
Well, so you guys are putting together really amazing social content too for the podcast. And I know that's always a question of how do I get creative with social content? A lot of people, their podcast content looks the same. It's the same short clips of just the host, but you guys have gotten really creative, I feel, with it. So any tips for getting creative or innovative with your social media content, and just making it stand out from the rest?
Yeah, I have to give a big shout out to Jake Hurwitz. He is my friend from high school. And back to your question about how do you create relationships,
Yep.
uh, he wasn't even the person I was referencing from high school, but he's somebody who came to me, and actually I came to him. I saw all the stuff that he was doing with Thursday Labs, and he said founders and people in C-suite need to create more personal content. I saw what he was doing. I was like, great, can you hook us up? And so he's been editing a lot of those clips, and I think it just comes from how do we make it different. It comes to what questions can we ask to kind of. I don't want to be a gotcha podcast, but feel like these people are a little bit more themselves. They haven't drinking 2 beers, but they feel like they're a little loose, and they're just talking like a human being and not spitting out buzzwords. And I think from there, the content just is better. But I think it's something that everybody's struggling with. It's hard to create good podcast content, or content in general when it's so saturated. A lot of people have podcasts. A lot of people are putting out content constantly. So, just how do you differentiate yourself, whether it comes from the visuals, or the question, and also making sure that the content is, I try to make the content for the guests and making sure that they feel heard and they just think this was the best podcast that I've been on, because then they're going to share it. And if they share it, then you're getting to a whole nother audience that might share it. So I start with them in mind, and I know that Jake at Thursday Labs does as well. And I hope it's working. We'll see. But I think it's a question that everybody's constantly asking themselves.
Yeah, for sure. It's great. And I think too, we were again talking about this off record, but I think there's always this question with building a podcast, especially around a brand of, I want to get it sponsored. I want to get it, I want to monetize my show. That's like the ultimate goal. But I like how you have this position of, my goal is to add value to the guests, to create a great experience for them, but also to create a great experience for the audience too. And I think those benefits of driving whatever you want to drive to your business through that podcast will eventually happen if you focus first on retaining attention, serving the audience, etc. So, any additional thoughts on that with just changing your
Yeah,
perspective on it?
yeah. I mean, you wouldn't go up to somebody and ask them for money, really, unless you're in a really dire situation. So asking a viewer, right, a consumer for money is like crazy from the jump. Uh, and you need to build the value on the front end to help them, or to actually make that possible. I view my podcast as something that I've been doing it for 4 years, and I check the listenership a little bit, but I view it as either a sunk cost for myself, and the company, and not being something that's going to return on investment immediately. And I think with that, it provides yourself more grace. Like, I'm not trying to live off this podcast. I'm not trying to pay rent off it. I'm just trying to meet new people, provide like get to know them, give them a platform to tell their stories, and the rest will work itself out. And to date, it has. But I think it's the same thing. Everybody wants to get rich quick. The podcast is not a get rich quick scheme. When I was advising professional athletes on starting podcasts, I was like, this is actually the worst ROI based on dollar to dollar metrics.
Yeah.
However, if you do this right, it might. And I remember I explained this to Xavier Scruggs, who played a couple years in the league. He's looking for his next step. And I explained that this isn't going to make you rich. This isn't going to pay for your kids' college tuition. However, it will open up doors that will be ROI positive for you. And then within a year of doing his podcast, he got an offer he had somebody from ESPN on, and then they brought him on. They loved the way he interviewed and kept it casual. And then now he's one of the hosts of Baseball Tonight a couple of years later, and is getting checks from ESPN and living out his dream. But I don't think those happen without him understanding that I'm just going to put out 50 episodes and see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was talking to someone the other day too about using it almost like a client generation lead funnel type of deal. Obviously, not using that as like the main reason you're reaching out to someone. But to your point, it's a lot easier to make an ask of, hey, come on my show versus, hey, can we sit down for a demo for 30 minutes for me to share about my service or product? And that's the way you're building a relationship. It's a lot easier of an ask to spark that relationship that could potentially turn into revenue down the road.
I'll be totally upfront with you. When I started the podcast, it was not about lead generation. It was just,
Mm-hmm.
hey, let's talk to cool people. Now with OpenFortune, we're upfront that it is.
Yeah.
And at first I was a little hesitant about it. I was like, really? Like, are we doing this for lead generation? Like, it's not going to come across authentic. And which I hate that word, but I used it. And then I was kind of starting with, like, it was a little bit more bait and switchy to be honest. And then it was just like, you know what, let's just come out with it saying, hey, this podcast is sponsored by OpenFortune. I'm the CMO of this company, and we want to have you on as a guest. Here are the guests that we've had on in the past. And nobody has said anything. We had like 80% of those turn into SS1s for us, or like hop on a call with us. nobody has said it felt bait and switchy, because every podcast has, or not every podcast, but it's very common for podcasts to have sponsors. And all we're saying is this: we want to meet cool people. We want to have you on the show. Here's what OpenFortune does after the show. We're in the sponsorship read. If it makes sense to hop on a call, great. If not, all good. And people have been like, that's great. That's awesome. Cool, sweet. And it's been working really well, from creating relationships and lead flow. So I think being upfront with it too is possible and doesn't look bad on your character. At first I thought it would. And if you're just upfront and clarity is being kind, then it'll pay dividends. So I think your friend is right. And I think more people should do that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I want to talk to you about some of your personal endeavors and how they're contributing just to your overall mental health, wellness, everything, to be able to show up as a professional. But you've done a lot of triathlon training, leading a book club, volunteering as a tutor, which is all amazing and incredible, just to have those outside
Yeah.
things and hobbies and activities that you're into. So yeah, how does making space for those personal pursuits contribute to how you show up as a professional?
Yeah, I think coming out of college, I was like grind, 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 work, work, like work is your identity. And then kind of realized, okay, there's more to life than just work, and I need to make space for that. And that's how I show up as a good partner in my relationship. That's how I show up as a good worker for OpenFortune, a good colleague, as well as a good friend to anybody. And you have to make that space. It's cliche. So for me, I saw doing the marathon, doing a half Ironman as something that it's goal setting, it's something out of work, and it's taking care of my personal health. I've been going to therapy for 4 or 5 years, like a lot of people, and it's becoming less taboo for dudes to talk about. I think more like straight guys should go to therapy. And that's been helpful for me, just to talk about. Nobody at work wants to hear about, nor should they. You kind of got to keep it business and personal separate, like church and state. And I think just creating space for yourself, as cliche as it is super helpful, and finding ways to give back as much as you can.
Yeah, 100%. And you got to talk about that stuff with someone, right? You can't keep it all in.
Yeah,
And if it's a therapist that can help you process and work through things, I think
sure.
that's the way to go. So,
Yeah,
that's amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been so helpful. We'll definitely have you back down the road, to catch
yeah,
up and see what you're up to. And hopefully you'll be joining us for an event in June in New York. So looking
yes.
forward to that. But got to know where we can stay in touch with you. Where can we find the podcast? And we'll of course have everything linked below as well.
Yeah, you can. It's called "How the Fuck Did You Get That Job?" Um, and that's what it's exactly about. And you can find me on Instagram at Jaffin, Jaffin, or add me on LinkedIn. And would love to, connect and talk to anybody about anything that I spoke about, or something unrelated completely.
Yeah, for sure. And how about Open Fortune? Where can we learn more
Yeah,
about you
and
guys?
we can find you can find OpenFortune at OpenFortune on socials. Mostly LinkedIn is where most of the content is coming out, but also openfortune.com. And hit me up if you want a box of fortune cookies, and I will send you some, because that is in my perks.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you joining us today. It's been
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, really appreciate you having me on. I'm honored. So excited to see you this summer.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Marketing Happy Hour podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. If you want more of Marketing Happy Hour but don't know where to start, we invite you to download our free Marketing Happy Hour starter kit at marketinghappyhr.com/starter-kit. This interactive magazine-style PDF walks through who we are, includes helpful resources like a marketing term glossary and the printable daily planner sheet that we actually use ourselves, and contains clickable links to our episode recommendations by subject area. Not to mention all the fun extras like a quiz, the link to our Marketing Happy Hour Insiders Facebook group, a word search, a playlist, a goal-setting guide, content inspo by month, and more. It's our hope that you'll dive into this resource and walk away more confident in your career journey with a group of industry pals that you can lean on for advice and support. Snag your free starter kit today at marketinghappyhr.com/starter-kit for all of the info you need to become a Marketing Happy Hour insider.